The year 1964 was when bands such as the Beatles and the Rolling Stones ruled the airwaves, selling records like hotcakes and topping charts across the world. Except for a tiny holdout island on the tip of the Malayan peninsula, Singapore. In Singapore, the band ringing the cash registers was a group known as The Quest, whose records sold over 200,000 copies. That is one for every 10 people living in Singapore at that time. There is evidence that this was party town with a cinema and music industry that dominated the region. And at the center of this golden age was a legendary figure, a sari-wielding lady boss for the local arm of EMI Records, one of the biggest international recording companies at that time. She was rumored to have been responsible for over 3,000 records, many of them best-selling hits. But this is where things get close to being a real myth. There is very little evidence to show for what she did. We just know that her name was Daisy Devan. I am Rebekah Sangeetha Dorai. I am an actor, singer, and voiceover artist. I must admit, no, I've never heard of the name Daisy Devan. To know that there is an executive who had a huge part to play in the creation of some of the biggest acts of the time, and a woman, and the head of one of the largest recording studios in the region, it's wild to me how I never knew her name. I feel the fact that women in my generation don't know about her, I think it's a huge shame. I think there is an entire bank of memory that lives only inside people's minds. That doesn't exist anywhere on internet records. And part of my journey is to go, hi, can I borrow some of that bank in your mind? Can I photocopy it so that it can be kept for future generations? As a woman, I really want to know about this other woman's journey. I want to know how she did what she did.
The only thing people remember about this building was the fact that a terrorist event happened here. It was a bomb planted by Indonesian extremists. 3 people died, and it was a huge tragedy. There was another tragedy that happened here that people do not know. One of the biggest recording studios in the region was also in this building. This place, the studio inside, was a playground for so many artists, so many musicians, a place we can come and create. And now, not just is that recording studio gone, but the entire memory of that place, it's all gone.
Just to add, this was the home of the EMI Recording Company, where the mythical figure of Daisy Devan held court on the 4th floor. From what we know, she was the boss of an empire that ran a huge recording studio the size of a badminton court, churning out hundreds of hit records from artists across the region. The best part is that EMI Singapore was simply one of the biggest names in a market full of different players.
There was several hundred local labels in the 60s issuing all kinds of music. Many were local recordings, some were licensed from companies in Taiwan or Hong Kong or Indonesia. This is a local Singapore band, recorded in 1967 for the obscure Eagle label. This is the only record they ever made. This was produced by Ruby Records, a very small private company in Singapore, which only in business for a short time, from 1957 to the early 60s, because their factory burnt down in a big fire.
There are no records of just how much the local music industry of the era was worth. We know that EMI Singapore started on the island even before World War II. But the real boom happened just a year before The Quest released their 1964 best-selling record, when one local group made waves with their original music.
They were quite surprised when the Crescendos, which was the first local pop band to record in the 60s, were as successful as they were at the height of the Beatles mania. And it opened the eyes of everybody in the music industry, certainly, to the fact that it was possible to make money out of recording local pop music. So I think that's the game changer.
I can imagine someone like Daisy Devan riding the wave of such an industry boom. As an actor, perhaps the best way to understand who she was is to literally get into her character. But how do I do that when we know so little of her? I'm going to start by imagining that someone that powerful would be calling the shots from a sturdy wooden table. A telephone, the closest thing to the internet in those days to help me project my power. A typewriter to issue my directives. Aha, and a waste paper basket to throw out things I don't like. However, my imagination alone is not enough.
There's something about her poise, right?
Yeah. And her feet were together?
Poise together.
And does she wear glasses?
No glasses. No. She's animated.
Super animated with that.
Not overly, but she's not afraid to use hand to express.
Keir Johari is an author. I have one of his books. But most importantly, he's someone who spent time with Daisy right before she died.
And her back is straight?
They're very distinguished.
Distinguished.
And she has actually shared some of her memories with him. So I think he'll be a very, very good resource.
We know the artist. That's the first thing we know. We know the artist. We love the music, and we say, okay, so this is the producer. But who's behind the producer? And that's Daisy Devan. I mean, she's the de facto executive producer for all of these records.
Keir met Mrs. Devan in the year 2000. He was helping to organize a fundraising concert by one of Malay pop's biggest names, Sharifah Aini, who insisted that one of the guests of honor be the great Daisy.
She was the artist and repertoire manager, signing up artists, album production, song selection, what to release, when to release.
According to Keir, Daisy Devan was behind some of the greatest female singers that the region has ever produced. We're talking about pop divas whose music still gets millions of views on YouTube today.
This was done in 1967, and how apt the title is called Release Me. So Mrs. Devan told me there was a party for this at her house so that the very first press will arrive and they played at
the party.
At the party.
Yet something is not quite right, especially if she really did bring all these hit albums to the market.
And to Ahmad Nawab? I'm very, very curious. So if let's say I am the person who made Taylor Swift who she is, but then I want people to know that I was the one who pushed her there. Susanna Hamid, R. Varghese, S. Atan, so that people can tell, hey, you want to make a star? Let's work together. So in the same way, that's what Daisy did for all of these people, but why is her name not on any of the records? Terbitan dan Susunan, Kasim Masdor. No Daisy.
Maybe Mother Music felt that there was no need for her to be there. She's there without having her name on.
It's all fine to say that Daisy operated quietly behind the scenes, but what made her stand out as a female record company executive during those times?
Can you tell me, like, where her fingerprints are?
A message from Bapa, Malaysia.
Like, I remember I picked up this one. This one I'm very familiar with.
Majula Singapura, State Anthem of Singapore. Singapore Ministry of Education Choir. Made in India.
It's Majula Singapore.
It's Majula Singapore.
So she organized this. It was produced by EMI. EMI was commissioned by the Ministry of Culture to produce Majula Singapore.
Hang on, this is big. One moment I learned that Daisy was a star talent manager during the 1960s and 70s. And now I hear that she was also a producer on the recording of Singapore's national anthem earlier in 1959. Bernard Tan is one of the founders of the Singapore Symphony Orchestra. More importantly, he was involved in the year 2000 re-recording of the island's national anthem. Perhaps he could speculate on the kind of person Daisy Devan would have been if she was the EMI producer who put the original 1959 recording together.
You would have to have a good producer with two things: a good ear and an understanding of music. I may have heard the name Daisy Devan, and of course, EMI at that point of time worldwide was one of the largest and most important recording companies. So if Daisy Devan was running the A&R for EMI, she must have been a person with all of the requisite musical judgment. It doesn't mean that you had to understand how the equipment worked. You would have recording engineers, but she would have to know enough to tell them what to do to make the whole thing come together. So I must say kudos to Daisy Devan for pulling that off.
Whew. I feel like I'm holding history.
I almost feel like we should be writing songs about Daisy Devan.
Let's see if I can try a lower key.
You know what? I'm going to do just that.
That's a not very nice line.
It's been a very
But there are so many questions I need answers for before I can even finish this tune. Was Daisy Devan really a creative force to be reckoned with? Or was her job simply to spot the right talent?
Hello? Come in. Right this way. I know you. Come. Sit down, both of you. Do you want something to drink? Okay. So, what do you have for me today? Okay, well, I know why you are here. But why are you here? Yes, you. I want you to say it.
Nobody had a sense what the music business was. With EMI Records, she would have access to the finances. At the same time, on the promo side, she would have access to the media.
Okay, pause. Okay, but try again, this time smoother and brighter. You know what I mean?
So the artist needs people like Mrs. Devan because they are the one that will lead you into the big open world.
But my dear girl, I'll be very honest with you. Beauty is not enough. Beauty will turn heads. But you need something more to move your soul.
The job of someone like Mrs. Devan would have to be like, I'm going to give birth to you to the world.
I feel like there never before has been a time such as now where I have a platform like the internet that opens me up to the world. I think the struggle is actually getting on that path to eventually be seen or to be accessed. If you open up Spotify right now and you see an artist like right at the top, that was curated. It's paid for by people who have the means and ability to do so, which in a way is what Mrs. Daisy Devan was. Yet, was Daisy simply a curator of talents, or did she nurture them? Datuk S. Atan is one of the most prolific producers from EMI music during the 1970s to 80s.
The music cannot above the singer.
So
The singer must be clear.
So that the voice can come.
Yeah.
His works include some of the company's best-selling hits. More importantly, Daisy Devan was his boss.
The song we select, kita and the artist. When artist, yes, when artist good, they sing nice. Oh, very good.
And so this is a lot of work that you're doing in the studio. So then
Yeah.
once we sent it and then it's being pressed, that a record is pressed.
I have to approve that one.
I see.
Most of the singers don't like me, actually. Because I'm so strict. This Mrs. Devan teach me a trick. Because they want a deadline. They give me a deadline. You must finish in that whatever deadline. You must complete it.
Why is that? Why you never say?
No, he's my boss. I have to respect her. Anything she want, yes, I will say yes.
Did Daisy ever interfere in your job?
She watch. No, when it comes to money, this is the one who sign. When I need the money, I will ask her. I have to check with her. Okay, I want about 20 music. This album, why 20? She asked me. Okay, I want the string, but six string. I want the brass 4. Then the rest all rhythm section.
Did you feel like she let you do your work to the best of your ability?
Yes, exactly. She's a good boss.
I mean, it all boiled down to her giving you exactly what you needed in terms of funds.
Exactly.
But also stepping back.
Yes.
She will balance the book so that
Exactly.
you creatives can do what you want.
Yes.
And then she handles the money.
Yeah, all
The fact that before he even stepped into the studio and did all those things, it was Daisy doing it. Sometimes the best creative managers, they don't manage, they nudge. It's up to you to take it further and see what you want to do with it.
And this was an era where female bosses were rare. In 1960s Singapore, women were just coming into the workforce, making up barely 20% of the economy.
Persons aged 10 years and over by occupation and sex, census 1970. Occupation, male versus females. Administrative and managerial workers. Males, 8,867. Females, 589. And Daisy Devan was one of them. That's 6%. 6%!
Exactly what did it mean to be in this very small percentage? And what was it like for women like Daisy back in the day? I find a lead in Betty Koo, a lady who was a magazine editor back in the 1970s.
I graduated with political science degree from the University of Singapore, which in those days, 1966, was quite rare for both men and women. In the magazines, there was her work, and it was edited by a man, and it was fuddy-duddy because it promoted women to be just knitting and doing all the womanly things. But we were all, like you say, liberal, and wanted to get into careers where we could advance. The thing is, don't wait for people to do things for us. Be proactive.
Was Daisy Devan part of this group of feisty women in Singapore during those times? And how did that get her into a massive music company like EMI?
She was not a record industry person originally. She came from just a business background in Singapore.
Allocating rubber, arranging shipping space, handling export papers, banking and insurance, typing and secretarial work, translations in French. Ooh la la. And the current prices of rubber is the work of Mrs. Daisy Devan.
She was someone who's already active, showing that women were contributing to business in Singapore.
1956, Woman of the Week. I love that.
She was the first woman to be an A&R manager in Singapore. It's also very unusual. In fact, it's unusual even in world terms. There were very few other female A&R people at that time, in the 60s and the 50s.
The Business and Professional Women's Club was formed recently. And it goes on to say Mrs. Devan, who is Program Secretary of the Pro Term Committee of the new club, wow, is widely traveled and runs her own home as well as a busy office job.
EMI being the conservative company, which we know it was, I think it is to their credit that they didn't dismiss her as being a serious contender because she was female. They simply saw her as a capable business person.
Was Daisy Devan really just an outstanding businesswoman ahead of her time?
Nobody praises because you're a maverick.
But why is her legend still lurking around in the shadows of memory? There is a famous story in the local music scene that may suggest that she was more than just a suit.
I saw the way you were together as a band. And I want to know if together the four of you can create something remarkable. I think you can, but I want to know if you think you can.
It's a band. When we met Daisy, that will be in 1964. Somehow we managed to get an audition with EMI. And she likes the way we play.
Very good, Henry. So this is my proposition. I want you to go back and do 2 original songs. Create 2 original pieces of music and come back here, same time next week. I will hear it.
It's a tall order. Yeah, so we were still young lads. We were in our teenager, I was 17.
Let me tell you a secret. I will never tell you to do something unless I believed that you can do it.
1 week later, we go back to the studio and record. I think within a week, it went up the charts. It's very fast. To be #1 for 12 weeks. And everybody knew you knock out the Beatles for 12 weeks.
Daisy Devan pushed the quest to write their own songs and not just cover what was popular on the radio. That takes vision. It's easy to overlook that if you just think of her as a business suit.
I built a lot of memories inside here. Like my very first ever professional theatre audition was inside the space, right here in that room up there. For me, what Substation is and what I did inside here is what she possibly did in McDonald House, but 100 times more. So many records, so many artists, so many milestone events that could have taken place there as she walked through those halls, and we will never know because she never documented them. I feel like Daisy's story worries me about my own legacy. She lived by a different set of what is successful and what is not. I wonder if she would have thought differently if she was in an era of social media.
Daisy Devan may not have gotten any lasting memorials in brick or stone, but are there traces of her in the recollections of other artists from the era?
Can't control.
My God, man! How you been?
Okay,
You? Mr. Shanty.
Yeah, that's it. I'm gonna play the song.
That's Mr. Shanty.
Daisy appeared to us like, someone big shot, like, in EMI and all that. That would be about 1969, 67.
Mrs. Devan.
That's quite
became
a strong name.
Yeah, because very, very formal and,
Yeah.
I felt like I was going to school or principal.
By the mid-1960s, the scene was also changing, with rock and the blues giving music a harder edge. EMI signed bands like the Stray Dogs, who dominated the Malaysian charts in 1971. And then there were bands like the Surfers, who became the pop rock sensation known as the October Cherries after leaving EMI. Did Daisy make an impact on what they were doing?
EMI look us up because the Stray Dogs were, up and coming band and all that. We went up for recording, more or less an interview to get to know her and to know the band and all that. My first impression was she was someone up there.
What did she look like? What did she say? Do you guys remember that interaction?
Just ask us a few questions like, do you have an original song and all that? Yeah, we have one. And so we say, okay, let's go for it. Yeah. We're all in our 20s, and then the idea of getting a record made is like, wow, super big.
Daisy Devan encouraging the bands to write their own songs seems like a common thread. But did she go even further?
I recorded like quite a lot. I made one whole album, a few singles, but it was always with the producer and the recording, not with Mrs. Devan. She, like usual, come into the booth and go out.
She doesn't interfere with the recording. The moment she knew what we were recording and the purpose of that record we couldn't record, she left us alone. She actually let us choose the songs or the tunes.
Was giving initiative to the musicians part of Daisy Devan's style of management? As an artist, I can appreciate the approach, but would it have been too hands-off for other artists? I decide to look into another genre of music that Daisy Devan was known to be interested in.
Malay popular music essentially is syncretic. So it's a fusion of Western styles and then infused with Malay, probably traditional style.
A record from the 1960s by some local Malay artists for the obscure Swallow label. The cover even mentions it's for the Agogo show.
Apparently, Daisy Devan was very invested in signing Malay artists to EMI Singapore. There are claims that some of the biggest stars of the region were groomed by her. According to this blog post by 70s Malay pop star Sarina Hashim, Daisy was like a big sister to her throughout her career at EMI.
It makes sense by simple economic logic that when EMI was doing well, as they were in the 60s, because they had a number of very successful acts, Daisy obviously would have had more freedom to initiate recording contracts with other artists that she thought were worth recording.
The local bands, local artists benefited from it because there's money for recording, promotion and all that. I think their involvement helped to kind of push the game a bit.
I'm wondering if any of these pop stars could shed a bit more light on Daisy's hand in their success.
There's an interesting example of an EMI record by a popular Malay singer called Sangeetha Dorai. It was recorded about 1971.
You will be here. Yes.
We are meeting Sangeetha Dorai, a legendary singer whose career spans over 50 years.
Hi, Madam Dorai. Right this way, right this way.
Sangeetha Dorai, she started her career at 15 years old. And at such a young age to be plucked, to sort of be discovered and then pushed into the spotlight. I want to know if Daisy was part of shaping Sangeetha's career.
Dan saya jumpa Mrs. Devan, ya. Dia say hello dengan saya lah. Walau saya tak pandai sangat berbahasa Inggeris, saya lagi budak-budak lah masa tu. Saya tengok muka dia macam takut gitu.
And number two, I want to know if Sangeetha Dorai had any autonomy, or if Daisy was part of going, no, this is your brand, this is your look. 3 or 4 times when you were singing.
Yeah.
But did you have any other interactions with her? Like, did you ever meet her? Never.
No. Kalau kita nak pergi jumpa dia, pergi ambil royalty, kita ambil dan balik dah. Datang macam tu.
I want to ask you about that album cover where you are wearing a sari. How did that come about?
Pasal lagu tu, saya menyanyikan lagu lagu Hindustan. Apa lagu tu saya lupa. Taj Mahal. Beli baju sari.
So it wasn't Daisy at all. It wasn't a sense that she...
No.
What? This is news to me. I thought that because it looked like her sari, so I thought maybe like she gave you the... I was a little disappointed to know that there was not much contact between the two of them because I had built up this image in my head that, oh, you know, she wore a sari on one of her albums. That sari could have belonged to Mrs. Devan. I thought there was some sense of relationship.
Ya, Mrs. Devan pun tak ada cakap apa pun. Kita pakai sari pun, dia pun tak ada cakap apa-apa. Oh, pakai sari, tak mana.
Even in the photo shoot, she was...
Mrs. Devan never controlled how they look. For Madame Huri had complete creative control. She picked all her outfits. There was never somebody forcing her and saying, you're a young girl, you're a teenager, you wear this now.
Dia masuk di sini, dia dengar.
So this is the main door?
Yeah.
So she will come in like that? So she will come in like that?
Yeah. Just tengok macam gitulah. Just tengok. Dan dia cakap dengan producer, dengan technician, dan lepas tu dia keluar. Dan dia tak maybe dia takut saya takut ke apa, maybe dia tak disturb saya masa tu.
Oh, she didn't really want to disturb much. Do you remember how she was standing? Imagine being in a company that was to musicians what Netflix is today to actors. And encountering a boss not wanting to scare a young artist. That says a lot. I think there's a reason why even the late Malay pop superstar Sharifah Aini paid tribute to Daisy Devan during her concert in the year 2000.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I would love to give my gratitude to one very, very special lady, to give a round of applause to Mrs. Devan. Wherever you are, I love you, Mrs. Devan. Where are you?
And so at some point, Daisy was involved, but then afterwards, she released control to people who knew best. It was just a sense of changing times and Mrs. Devan's changing responsibilities.
What is happening with you boys? What is it I'm hearing about bowling alleys and very late nights? What's going on?
But at that time, there's no producer. There was her. There wasn't any producer. She was a producer. She was a producer.
You are the quest. You have an image to uphold.
She was in charge of the studio, in charge of the factory, everything at a very young age. Less than 30, I think she was.
If the public sees you all the time, if you are accessible to them all the time, your magic will disappear. The magic of the quest will disappear.
We have a close relation with her because she was actually directing what we should do, what we should not do. I think that's the entrepreneurial side of her. She got a very good acumen for identifying such things. And so we left it to her. I think she was doing a good job.
Yet, how much initiative did Daisy Devan really have? She was, after all, an employee of a huge conglomerate that was all about profit.
Singapore was then and has always been a business centre. It was where people came to create opportunities. For the record companies, it was just a way of producing a product which they could sell and market. In this case, Daisy, she would have been responding to some direction from the company, very likely, saying that we want you to find some local acts that we can promote and make a success of as well. The recording industry, if you decouple the romanticised version where it's some crusader for cultural heritage or something, they were a business.
You can contact lost friends.
Can you tell me about your business relationship with Mrs. Devan?
During those times, we knew nothing about contracts and all that.
So when we went into the office to sign, there was a whole lot of paper, agreement, and why not. Obviously, she drove a hard bargain, or EMI had policies that if we record with them, we didn't know that the song belonged to them.
And do you remember the percentage? Was it like 95% belongs to EMI, or was it 100%?
100%.
100%?
Yeah, 100%. EMI has a very complex contract, which I don't think a 17-year-old will understand. Yeah, but we look at it, the royalties rate are, of course, very low. In fact, royalties rate are never good with EMI.
2%.
Even with EMI.
The record company is a business. The people in charge want the company to be in the black. If things are not like that, they're going to look very indifferently to any suggestions that you do things which are not likely to make money or are going to increase the company's difficulties economically.
The important thing is very caring. She doesn't treat us like commercial digits, but as friends. That is the magic in her that we appreciate most. I don't know whether we made a lot of money for EMI or not. Records were very cheap. No one was complaining. And you can measure the success by the amount of pirates pirating a record.
Mrs. Devan, there is an urgent call for you from the police on line 2. You might want to take it now.
Hello?
Mrs. Devan, we found boxes of music records in a warehouse that we suspect are pirated copies. We would like your help to identify if they come from EMI artists.
I'm coming down. Thank you.
Piracy was a problem that ate into their profits. There's no doubt about that. But I think it's not realistic to lay all the blame just on one factor. A lot of things which had not existed before in the market started to occur, like changes in musical styles. You had disco coming in the 70s. They can go to a live venue and dance. Why do they need to sit at home listening to a record?
Also, there were shifts because of policies by the government. For example, the ban on yellow culture, which means looking at popular culture as in what's derived from the West as something negative. 1st of January 1970, ban on tea dances. Tea dances was where all the bands were making a living. Also, certain type of music was not allowed to be on local radio.
By the late 1970s, decline began to seep in, rising to a fog that would cloud the golden era of Singapore music from collective memory. But did we really forget because the business no longer sang to us? In the early days of looking up the life of Daisy Devan, I came across an incident that captured my attention. Singapore's original radio and television station once stored tons of records and recordings of TV talent time and live music shows that featured local musicians. But in 1967, a fire broke out at the Radio Singapore building, destroying a large part of this library.
I think it was a tragic loss because a massive, thousands of records were destroyed. There's no doubt about that. It's a bit of a myth that's been exaggerated, but it wasn't, I think, the end of RTS Record Library as such.
Apart from the fire, again, the whole attitude of not considering that these are important materials, like the first band performance, in black and white.
Apparently at some point, I don't know when, but at some point, a lot of RTS Record Library material was sold off.
As for the physical destruction of the Radio and Television Singapore Library, it would take the burning down of a department store, the Great Robinson's Building Fire of 1972, to finally trigger changes in fire safety regulations in Singapore. Perhaps our priorities then were, sadly, just too different.
Popular culture is by definition rather transient, and I think this often leads to it being considered not very important and therefore not worth preserving. So that's where you lose stories.
The question is, do we have this amnesia because there are certain things we don't want to remember? That is possible because the political history of Singapore in the 70s and 80s was very difficult. So that amnesia may be due to the political turmoil. There were a lot of people who made great contributions, like Daisy Devan and others, who are just forgotten.
It just shows the direction of where the country was, that you make the politician heroes, the artists as not important.
And the times were not kind to Daisy Devan towards the end of the 1970s. We know that by 1981, she was asked to leave her desk at EMI Singapore.
I was trying to imagine what it would have been like for her on her last day after over 20 years of sitting at this desk.
Devan, your card's here.
And she probably took today to really sit and take in all the details that she otherwise wouldn't have. We know it's hard. I think I imagine her to be far stronger than me. At least in the way I've played it, I've imagined her to be good. My time has come. Next person.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Devan, the car cannot wait. It's a busy street today.
I would definitely be bawling my eyes out, and I would have taken 10,000 pictures to remember this moment. But I think for the both of us, it would have been a very deep heartbreak.
We hear of a lot of musicians over the decades who are celebrated. Many of them are household names. But I feel her name kind of slipped through the cracks, and I don't know why.
Sujin Thomas was a reporter for Singapore's The Straits Times who covered the obituary for Daisy Devan's passing in 2009. I wonder what he saw and heard from the people who attended her funeral.
There were some eulogies, if I remember correctly. I remember a couple of members of the Quest were seated in front of me. A few others as well. I wasn't aware of who she was, so I had to dig, and I spoke to people and Singapore musicians. They confirmed it. Many of them had known her personally. They told me the story.
Like, what were some of the words that people used about her? Specifically, in what capacity? Like, did they say that she pushed music to the forefront, or was it more of, or what were they artists?
It was a mix of both. So it was about how she worked with artists to push their music, to generally get Singapore music heard. In Daisy's case, really surprised that whatever she did in the past was not made known. I don't have the answer for that.
I don't think the people who mattered to Daisy Devan ever forgot her.
No, I think at this point it's most befitting for us to hear a few words from our VIP guest today. Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Devan.
When you start off in a good way as a teenager and you have music in your blood, you should really continue to keep it going in your blood. And after the day you die, you put that little record on and play your little guitar, and then you will be a complete person. And even God will recognize you for that. Okay, that's all my best to them.
to be amongst the first female bosses during an era where women were not visible at the workplace, to be the person who launched the career of arguably Singapore's biggest music icons, and to be both a product and victim of the changing times. These things do not make Daisy Devan a mythical legend. They make her human and very real.
My name is Rebekah, and we've been sort of following the life of this woman called Daisy. This woman ran EMI for 20 years. On the other side, in the other vein, there's me, still figuring out a lot of things.
But Daisy Devan's story inspires me to push my own boundaries even further. I think that's the effect that women like her have on the rest of us.